Writing and creating is great, but editing other content marketers' work takes a special kind of skill, and one of those content editing experts is Tommy Walker. He's had a career that spans over 18 years, including being the editor-in-chief at Shopify Plus, and he's seen common mistakes that content marketers make time and time again when it comes to writing.
The other thing that bothers me to no end are words like ensure. No one ever says the word ensure in conversation, or as a small business owner, or as a blah, 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 blah. Ugh, yes, I do. So don't tell me. Water is wet. Like, I don't need to see that stuff.
It's why Tommy created the 3 axioms of content marketing that guides his writing and editing process. In this Marketing Powerups episode, you learn first why having a solid premise is one of the most important things when it comes to building and creating content. Second, why content is a form of social currency. Third, tips to make your content more shareable. And number 4, 1 power-up that's helped Tommy's career accelerate. Now, before we get started, I've created a free Powerups cheat sheet that you can download, fill in, and apply Tommy's 3 axioms of content marketing. You can go to marketingpowerups.com right now or find that link in the show notes and description below. Are you ready? Let's go.
Marketing Power-Ups. Ready? Go! Here's your host, Ramley John.
Let's jump in. Let's talk about marketing power-ups. You've been really working at, probably edited and created like thousands of articles, probably more. I don't, that's probably underestimating. You've published and created some content and edited content for Version Excel, Shopify Plus, LinkedIn, GoDaddy, the big names, and even more. You've probably seen like hundreds of mistakes, or things that just gets to you. I'm curious, what are things on blogs, on articles that just, come on, man, why?
Yeah. So there are a few different things. Like the ones that I can point out off the top of my head are cut your first 300 to 500 words, right? Generally speaking, and I've said this plenty of times, it's throat clearing, right? We're trying to get our thought out, and everybody thinks that, we need context. You need to get the context. If you try to justify it, it's well, I need to have the context up front to make sure that everybody knows. And it's no, they clicked the link from wherever it was that they clicked the link. If they have a problem, whatever, they already have the context in their brain. So you don't need that, right? And here's an interesting, I study, not as much as I used to, but I study how people interact with the web in general. And one of the questions I had is, how many words per minute can the average American adult read, right? It's really important when you're thinking about how people interact with the screen, and especially if you're writing content. So the average adult in the USA reads 238 words per minute.
Interesting.
Right? Reads nonfiction, you got to specify nonfiction, at 238 words per minute.
Yeah.
So if you have an introduction that's 300 to 500 words that's meandering,
right,
you're going to lose people.
Yeah.
Right? And you see this with if you look at YouTube graphs, or if you watch heat maps, and I love to watch heat maps on the blogs itself. If you watch any of that and you see that retention graph just drop down from the bottom, it's because you're not hooking people right away. So the introduction, that's the biggest thing for me. And you need to be spending the majority of your time on that, right? I come from a filmmaking background before I ever got into that. And one of the principles of filmmaking too is if you have a really solid beginning and you have a really solid end, a lot of people will be forgiving of the stuff in the middle, right? And I'm sure you could think of, if you put just a few minutes of thought into that, I'm guarantee you can think of some movies where that was really good. And then you watch it again and you're but was it? I kind of fell asleep in the middle there. So that's one of the most common things. I can talk too. So please shut me up or cut me
keep
off.
Going. This is fun.
The other thing that bothers me to no end are words like ensure. No one ever says the word ensure in conversation, right? Or as a small business owner, or as a blah, 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 blah. Ugh, yes, I do. So don't tell me. Water is wet. I don't need to see that stuff. And one of the main edits that I'll make, majority of the time, is just filler words, right? I like to edit for word economy more than anything else, because it's very clear to me that word choice, like, we have to understand that different words matter, right? Angry and infuriated and frustrated, like, these are all different levels of the same sort of feeling. So you can mislabel different words or different ideas and not clearly communicate the idea that you're trying to come across, because you're not using the appropriate word to communicate that level of feeling, right? Or emotion, if you're trying to do that. And the problem with that is you end up with 5 or 6 extra words that are completely unnecessary, because you're trying to express it. You can't quite get it out, but you're trying to. And it just adds so much more fluff to a piece.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of pieces that I've edited where once I get rid of those things, right? I like say tighten up the introduction, get rid of the word economy. I've seen pieces go from like 2,000 words to 900 and still not get to the proper thought.
That's crazy.
And then like the major thing, and this is the hard part, when I work with people that I work with, because I'm very selective in who my authors are, because I look for this really upfront. I try to do a lot of work upfront into doing this. It's just the premise of the premise of the piece itself, right? What's the overall idea that we're trying to communicate? Can you communicate it in 2 sentences or less, 3 sentences or less, really? And if you can't, then you need to rethink what that premise is overall. Because if we've all written a lot of the same types of posts, buyer intent, customer journey, blah, 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 right? If you're in B2B, you've written that article probably 6 different times. But if you can't communicate what that premise of that piece is, what are you bringing uniquely to the table? The rest of the piece is just going to suffer. Your intro is going to suffer. The structure of the piece is going to suffer. You're going to have the word count, or the words are going to be completely padded out. Those are the main things those are the main mistakes, right? I don't like to call them mistakes, but like opportunity moments that I've seen just over the years. And experience, it doesn't even matter how experienced the person is. I've written with some people for almost 10 years now, right? Different gigs, but 10 years. And I still see some of this stuff. And it's not because they're bad. They're actually fantastic authors. It's just a matter of like identifying that in yourself and breaking your own patterns, right? I think that's the other part, is pattern breaking. Because there's so much that we can see in the different articles that are out there in the world where it's like, let's build up. Here's an idea that we're trying to get to. Descend, subhead, build up, go down, subhead. And I like to think of that as a roller coaster article rather than a waterfall article, right? And that's the metaphor that I try to use on a regular basis.
I think the challenge you mentioned around like, the 2,000 word text into 900, that's like so comical, but I've seen it happen often because SEO and keyword researchers are like, oh, you need to have an article that's like 2,000 words to rank for this keyword. And then the writer is like, oh, what? You didn't give me much. I'm just going to fluff to it. Like, that probably gets to you, where like, if you can say it in 900 words, do it. Don't spread it out to try to rank for something and fill it with fluff just so that you can rank, keyword SEO best practice rather than.
Yeah. So 2 things, right? I can tell I've been doing a lot with the client. One of the clients I'm working with right now, actually take a step back here. That 2,000 word count, one, is arbitrary, and I'll give you some evidence to back this up. And what it reminds me of is when you were in high school and you're like, I've got a 2,000 word essay and I don't know what to say. So, and like, we're getting paid professionally. A lot of us are getting paid professionally to still write our high school level articles. And just because you get work doesn't mean you're good at the work. And I hate to say that, because I know that there are a lot of people who listen, who watch, who make a good living, who still are turning in high school level articles. And And that's okay. I mean, make your living, do what you got to do. But if you're focusing on your craft, these are things that you really, really, really need to be doing to set yourself aside from everybody else. Second, on that same note, I've been researching the SERPs for hundreds of articles at this point. I've incorporated this meta-analysis in my when I'm going to compete for different key phrases. And what I'm finding with Google right now is I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, right? I'm not going to say word count doesn't matter. But what I am going to say is that a lot of what we understand, the sort of common, it needs to be long form, I've been seeing 400-word articles outrank 5,000-word articles. I've been seeing articles with fewer links get outranked by with big stuff, big companies. HubSpot really is the one that kind of they set the tone for the rest of us, and they're like 5,000, 7,000 words.
Right.
Get all these major backlinks and all of this stuff. And it's like, no, I only needed 700 words to get this out. And now I'm seeing in Google with these meta-analysis that I'm doing, that sometimes a 700-word piece is all that's necessary. Or if it's like a straight definition and it doesn't need all this context, right? Sometimes the straight definition that's like 40 words. This blew my mind. I saw a SERP. It was like 40 words, 400 words, 4,000 words. And I'm like, yeah. And like the clear correlation to me when I saw that was like Google is now really looking at like the bigger picture. And we think, I could get on this. I could stay on this all day long. We think that, we need to give all of the information, but like, think about how much Google data really has on you. Like 80-something% of the browser share is with Chrome. We've all got Google Analytics installed, right? It used to be that Google's looking at like, oh, how long are you on this result? And, do you bounce off, right? The pogo sticking idea. Now it's like, no, Google can tell how far people are scrolling down, how engaged they are, how much their mouse is moving around, how much they're like, they can see. And if they're, being real creepy, looking at your webcam while you're reading the stuff, I doubt they're actually doing that. But I mean, maybe, they have a microphone in your pocket at any given point in time, right? They're looking at all this and going, hey, what's the most valuable piece of content? If their goal is to serve the world with the most valuable information that they're looking for, they're going to use a lot more than we even can comprehend to understand what value is. So anyways, you mentioned word count, and then that just got me on this whole other.
Before we continue, I want to thank those who made this video possible, 42 Agency. Now, when you're in scale-up mode and you have KPIs to hit, the pressure is on to deliver demos and signups. And it's a lot to handle: demand gen, email sequences, RevOps, and even more. That's where 42 Agency, founded by my good friend Camille Rexton, can help you. They're a strategic partner that's helped B2B SaaS companies like Profitwell, Teamworks, Sprout Social, and HubDoc build a predictable revenue engine. If you're looking for performance experts and creatives to solve your marketing problems at a fraction of the cost of in-house, look no further. Go to 42agency.com to talk to a strategist to learn how you can build a high-efficiency revenue engine now. You can find that link in the description below. Let's jump back in. Yeah, I think we can go in deep. You mentioning the scroll thing, it reminds me of with YouTube. They have like audience retention curve. They probably hidden in the background have something like that, knowing like, oh, they don't scroll all the way. They only scroll 30%. Is a bad content versus like a video that does like a Mr. Beast video that has 80 to 90% audience retention. That probably gets promoted more. So that's super interesting that you did mention that around Chrome, that they do have access to that.
And that's the thing, is YouTube is owned by Google, right? So like, you can't tell me, I've worked within large orgs, so probably there's not a lot of information sharing that goes along, but there's permutations of algorithms, and the main things, and I run the YouTube channel too, right? And you have a YouTube channel. So the main things that they care about, right? Because they're robots, so they can't really tell if something resonates, is click-through rate, right? How long people are staying on. Do you have comments and likes? And if that's the case and you're talking about subject matter that everybody else is talking about, how are you going to know as a robot whether or not something is good, right? Retention graph. Do people click? Are they staying? And are people talking about it? Like, that's That's it. That's all they have for information. So how can you optimize for those things? Human-centric bits of information, right? And that's where it's always been. That's where has been heading in the technology now, especially with the AI that's out there. Like that's just where it's going. That's where it's going. That's where it's always been. And now the tools are available to like really make that the case.
That makes sense. I think that kind of relates to one of your 3 axioms of content marketing around social currency. But let's jump into that. You put together these 3 axioms that you used to guide you creating like content and developing content specifically for SaaS, and it's reflective of how people consume that content now. And one of the first one is, and we've already been chatting about this, that you will get 80% of the you will
a
get
solid premise will get you 80% of the way there.
Yep. So you totally got that. I'm curious how that relates to the content marketing and
Sure. So a solid premise will get you 80% of the way there. I come from a filmmaking background before I ever got into marketing, right? A solid premise of a piece or content in general, content with a capital C, so podcasts, video, whatever. People are going to be forgiving of ahs, not necessarily bad video quality, but you need good audio quality for any of this stuff. They're going to be forgiving of a lot of things if the core idea of what it is you're trying to communicate is really there. I'm sure that you've listened to podcasts. I can guarantee you have listened to podcasts. I have listened to podcasts. Other people who are listening to this podcast are forgiving of, maybe your guest mic isn't as good as your mic, right? Or maybe the core idea of what it was that they were talking about was really good, and you'll be forgiving of ums and ahs and or a dog barking in the background, right? Little things. So a solid premise is really what you need to sort of center the idea around. But the other idea behind that is you need to give people something to latch onto. And this is, I could say like, oh, attention spans have been dwindling over the last year. No, this has always been the case. You need a solid premise. So let me give you an example of a couple of premises. I think both work, right? Word choice matters. So let me give you an idea, or let me give you a couple ones and see if you can tell me just from the premise.
Okay. I like this game.
What this property is. Okay. So this is a show about 7 strangers picked to live in a house, work together, live together, and have their lives filmed.
Big Brother? Is that?
This is what people are. This is what it's like when people stop being polite and start getting real. What's that premise?
Probably Big Brother or like some kind of like social. Is that?
It's the real world.
Oh, the real. Oh man, shoot! I didn't watch
the real
that.
world.
I didn't have MTV when I was a kid.
Yeah. Okay. So, but the thing is Big Brother had the same.
Yeah. Right. They latched onto the same
modified version of that premise.
You're right. Interesting.
Right. What's it like when a bunch of people live in a house that they can't leave? Right. That's the modified version of that premise. And when you have a solid premise, people will come up with their own permutations of that premise, which will only solidify the validity of the original premise, right? This is a show about a bakery in New Jersey, family-run bakery in New Jersey, who likes to make very complicated, intricate cakes.
Cake Boss, right?
Cake Boss,
yeah,
exactly.
I'm not crazy.
And then many permutations of Cake Boss.
Interesting.
This is what happens when amateur chefs work with a professional chef in a competition, and that professional chef has a bit of a temper.
Kitchen,
Hell's Kitchen.
Hell's Kitchen, right?
Yeah. So like
interesting.
These premises, you can wrap your head around it, and that's the thing that gets you involved. You watch any movie trailer, right? And if that movie trailer communicates what the premise of that movie is, you're like, oh, that aligns with what I'm doing, like, or what I like. Cool. The Avengers are finally fighting Thanos, who we've been building up to for years, right? Like, there's just a solid premise will, if you deliver on that premise, a solid premise will get people through the door. And if you deliver on that premise and you continuously deliver on multiple premises or the main premise of the overall work that you're trying to do, people will keep coming back. And that's going to be important and plays into my third axiom. But people will be forgiving of the execution as long as you keep delivering on that premise and as long as you are continuously trying to do better with that premise.
Interesting.
Right. So that's a solid premise will get you 80% of the way there.
I love this example. I'm like, the first thing that came to my mind was around like John Wick, where it eventually got copied where like dog gets killed by a bad guy, goes on a revenge spree, kills everybody. And now like everybody, a bunch of movies like copy that pretty much, that same premise exactly. How does this? I'm curious how this applies to blogs.
I want to talk about John Wick.
Let's talk about John Wick
it's
first.
Funny. Did you ever see the movie Tropic Thunder?
Yes, I have seen Tropic Thunder.
So John Wick was basically, his car was destroyed, his dog was killed. Now he's going to kill everyone. Right? Tropic Thunder, they make fun of something like that with Ben Stiller's character, because they talk about one of his action heroes characters in the sequel, and he's like, this time he's going to kill everyone again. And it's like, that's John Wick 2.
Exactly.
That's John Wick 3.
Yeah,
that's John Wick 4.
And then there's now the ballerina, which is like the spin-off, which is pretty much the same.
This time he's going to kill everyone again. And it's like, that's a premise. Like, the execution of those movies is fantastic, but it was the premise that, he's going to kill everyone. That's a premise that so many action movies are built off of in the first place. And you're like, yes, that's a cool premise. I like it. I'll watch it over and over again. Sidebar on that. If you also look at how a lot of these movies are marketed, the trailers are all identically cut, and the posters, there's a lot of similarities. I wrote on this years ago about color theory. The posters will all use similar color schemes and composition because it's familiar, even if it's a bunch of different movies. So anyways.
No, that makes sense. And I see your show, The Cutting Room, is very similar. You have a premise. You invite people, they cut live. And the premise is the same. Same with the show, like marketing Powerups. People share a framework that's helped them.
Yep. We talk about the content marketing philosophy process in pregame before you edit an article live. We have industry leaders from, well-known companies. It's very easy to wrap your head around. So yeah.
This also, I feel like, this probably really applies to even content, article content, like blog posts, where a good thesis or like a good opinion will get you 80% of the way there. Where like, a fluff piece, it's going to be hard to get filled as much. But if you have a strong opinion, or like you interview some experts, or you have data, that premise will get you there 80% more. Is that how this can apply to like written content, so to speak?
Absolutely. And from you've got the major, the overarching level, and then the individual piece level. And what a lot of us, when we write content for blogs, when we create videos, when we do podcasts, like, I really like to think about this as content with a capital C. But when you look at the overarching theme, right, of the blog, of the channel, of the whatever, there has to be an overarching cohesive narrative. So when I was at Shopify Plus, the overarching narrative, we had a couple from a different brand level, but for the blog, it laddered up to something else. The company itself, the brand narrative behind Shopify Plus, set by Lauren Paddleford, absolutely amazing, was burning down the enterprise. Right down there. That's right, awesome. Because at the time nobody was taking cloud e-commerce seriously, and people were being overcharged, and it was really complicated, and all of this other stuff. The premise that laddered down to, or what we laddered up to on the blog, was what can happen when technology gets out of the way. Right. And then every piece that we wrote really kept that in mind, right? If we were writing about wrapping paper, right? Like adding add-on sales with wrapping paper.
Interesting.
Because there's gift wrapping your content, or the gift wrapping your things can add so many dollars per order. And then over time, right? A lot of times with the old systems, it would be difficult to implement a gift wrapping widget, right? It could take you 6 months. What happens when technology gets out of the way? You can implement this strategy that you've been wanting to do very easily. You can do it in weeks, or you can do it in minutes instead of months, right? So like everything has to ladder up to a meta premise. And that's been sort of the overarching theme of the publications I've run is it's like, what can we find that's the through line between all the pieces that we create? And then how do we look at that on an individual level?
This kind of hit me around like this term that product marketers are throwing around, like company narrative, where like, or product narrative, where like there's this thread line that kind of flows through, not just like content with a capital C, but landing pages, ads, like, everything. There are executives being on podcasts where they talk about this narrative. I guess that's how this is fitting in this world where like content marketing and product marketing is kind of colliding in one place.
Yeah, I think so. I think business leaders, large brands can really overcomplicate it. I think it's a lot simpler than a lot of what we kind of talk about in these spaces. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's starting to come together a lot more than it ever used to, as the space matures. And I think that's great. I think it's a great thing.
Love it. Let's jump into the second axiom. And this is super interesting around how decisions are made in Slack, and Slack's taken over the world, in the business world specifically. And if you can do it in a chat, do it. If you don't have to do a meeting, but I'm curious how this applies to content marketing. I'm guessing it's around shareability or like, I'm curious how this applies to content.
Yeah. So this is especially once everybody got locked down, it became a much bigger thing, but decisions are made in private channels, right? If I see a piece of content that I like, who am I sharing it with internally? And this kind of weaves into my third axiom too, but like decisions are made in Slack. We're going to have discussions about a piece of content in channels that nobody can see, right? It's fine. Like a lot of us will go, hey, let's get our stuff shared across social media and try to do all of that. But if you can get into a channel you cannot measure and you're starting a discussion around that, somebody likes this podcast, for example, and they share it with their colleagues, you're in a much better spot. So when you go and put out an offer, right? Say you wanted to put out a coaching offer or a framework that people can buy, right? The decision to make that, if it's a little bit of a higher investment, which is, I work in the B2B SaaS space, so usually it is, those conversations are going to be the thing that leads to a sale. And we have to think about when we create what conversation, and this is the thing that I really try to think about, is what conversation between the two different groups that are going to be involved in a buying committee, what are you trying to spark? What's that conversation? So we might write a piece where it's a software company, we'll say customer service, right? We'll say it's a customer service platform. I'm just coming up with this stuff off the top of my head. But the piece is around, the premise of the piece is, here's how customer service software can inform marketing, right? You're creating a piece that will bridge a gap between two parts of a company, that those conversations can be overlapping, which if you're in the position where, the part of the internal dialogue within the company, they're going, we really need to change platforms right now, right? You're one, bringing another group into that conversation, but two, you're facilitating conversations inside, right? Inside those channels that we as marketers can't see. And when people look at our stuff, we see it as direct. And then we go, man, we can't do anything with direct. Why aren't we optimal? But people are looking at this stuff from channels we can't see. And if you end up in a buying conversation, I've been on plenty of buying committees at this point, people will share, hey, here's why I think this company is the best one to look at. Look, they understand our problem way better than anybody else, right? And that goes back to the premise where if you can understand and communicate somebody's problem as well as, if not better than they can, right? You're putting words that they or you're giving a voice to problems that they might have, that's going to be the thing that leads to decision making further down the road, because you're thinking about the conversations that people are going to be having with each other, which will then lead to decision making. So that's kind of the bigger element to that. And then it weaves into the third premise, or the third axiom, which is content is a form of social currency, right? A lot of when we create content, we're thinking about, hey, what does this say about me, right? What kind of content am I creating that it's going to say about me, right? But just like the clothes we wear, or the music we listen to, or the movies we watch, the things that we share with people and present in the world speak to our identity. It speaks to our taste. I don't know. I mean, I guarantee you that if someone says, hey, what's your favorite movie right now? Part of you stiffens up, because you're like, oh my God, if I share what my actual favorite movie is right now, they're going to think less of me, right? Who's your favorite comedian? Like, you don't have to answer that question, right? But like, you know, that all plays into what these things say about us and our level of intelligence and our level of, learnedness. It speaks so much to that. And if we're able to create in a way that says something about our reader when they decide to share it, we want to make them look good when they share this stuff. So, from personal experience, my show is like the thing that I have the most about, or the most experience with this right now, or at least the closest personal experience with this. I know what I want it to say about people when they share it with somebody else, right? And we have 3 very tightly defined audiences. And I'll say with our freelancer audience, I've heard, I haven't seen this because it's outside of my sphere of influence now, which is great, is freelancers will share it with other freelancers because they're learning from the type of people that they want to write for, right? They're trying to get an understanding of how somebody at a high growth startup or at an enterprise level company thinks, so then they can create content or better their content to start writing for those types of people. And when they share it with other people within their network, they're going, oh my God, look at this like cool hidden resource. It's a gem. Like, I'm quoting other people right now. I'm really not trying to blow myself up on this. I'm very grateful for any time and attention that we get. I mean, as a creator, you know this, right? But it says something about them when they share it. And I kind of have an idea of what I want my show to say about the people when they share it. And that's just something that I think a lot of content creators in general aren't really thinking about. It's like, what does this say about me and my company? And it's like, no, what does it say about your reader and what it is that when they're sharing something? So, and if you're weaving that into the decisions are made in Slack, right? If you have a junior marketer going in and saying like, hey, this is an article I think is really good, and then people in the company don't think it's really good, genuinely, it says something about their taste, and it can promote or, keep their career back. Right. Like we have to really consider the stakes of what it means when somebody shares our stuff. You share a bunch of crappy stuff to your boss and they're going to look at you and like,
who is this guy?
Who is this guy?
You're fired.
Like, exactly. When it comes time to like the promotion and, does this person play well with others and all of this other stuff? That's something that's being considered, whether we think about it consciously or not.
Yeah,
it's true. And your opinion of somebody else is going to change based on what they share and what they present with the world. I think your hat is super cool. The way you present yourself is like a really cool person, right? I would want to hang out with you. I think you have really good taste in clothes. If I wanted to go clothes shopping, I'd be like, yo, what do you think?
I would have done.
Right? Like,
super cool. It makes sense though. Right.
Yeah. So yeah, content is a form of social currency. To recap, a good premise will get you 80% of the way there. Decisions are made in Slack, and content is a form of social currency. I think if you nail these things, right, and this is sort of like a sub axiom or something, if you nail these things, you're going to get repeat visitors, which should be, in my mind, a North Star metric, because if you're not getting repeat visitors, how are you ever ending up in the consideration set?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like we always optimize for new visitors and we're like, SEO will bring us new traffic. But it's like, yeah, but if that new traffic doesn't return, how many key phrases do you have to go after for the same person to be typing in all of those things to then go, you know what, this is the company I want to go with? No, you want repeat visitors. You want people sharing this stuff internally. You want these things. So you become part of the consideration set. People have said for years, no trust and like, and it's like, I think that's such BS because there is no trust or like metric in Google Analytics, right? But there are these proxy things that we can't measure, but really give you an idea of how decisions are actually made and if people are going to make an actual purchase from you, which ultimately is the goal, right? We want people to buy our stuff.
So good. There's so much good stuff you said there. I have a few follow-up questions around. First of all, the second axiom is you're really talking about this term. First time I heard it last year, like dark social. So, how do you find out that it's maybe it's impossible? Like, do you just ask people, hey, did you share our stuff on your company?
Nope.
Or like,
you don't.
There's no way.
You don't.
There's no. Yeah.
Nope.
All right.
Totally. No idea.
No
idea. And I am not the person who coined dark social. Not even a little bit. The first person I heard it from, I'll give credit where credit's due, is Brooklyn Nash. And great dude. Follow his stuff. Yeah, but I have no idea. You'll have no idea. You just have to have, like, for me, it's a matter of trusting the process, always trying to up level your work, try to improve your skills incrementally, and then trust that people are having these conversations. And I know when you say to the boss, trust me, bro, that never goes over well because there is also no trust me, bro metric.
Right.
But
that's true.
I think one of the things, if you wanted to look at a metric, first of all, like let's get into the weeds a little bit. Try to do as much attribution modeling as you can. UTM all of your things and do all the tracking things that are possible that none of us actually do because it's too time consuming and we're lazy. But then also look at your direct traffic, right? Like if you're looking at a report, look at your direct traffic because aside from the things that are misattributed, right? If you think about what's misattributed, you're looking at type in traffic, which is something you absolutely want. And you've got people coming from places you'll never see. And I think that's one that we sleep on a lot and something we should really consider a little bit more, especially if we're using best practices on all of our tracking links and stuff. That's one where we can go like, okay, these are things we can't see, we can't tell, but these are also really, really good indicators that we're doing something right.
I feel like the three axioms kind of work so well together. You're talking about social currency, and one of my questions was around like, how do you increase social currency? You talked about, making sure that you understand the people's problem, but also having a great premise, like makes it easier to share to folks and talk about, like you're talking about like real world, us like 7 people stuck in our house. Like it's easy. You can say it in one sentence versus like something super complicated. I forgot if I was watching somebody pitch a movie on YouTube once where like, if you can't say it in 1 or 2 sentences, what the movie's premise is, then the producer execs wouldn't accept it. And I feel like that's another way to really increase social currency is having a strong premise is a good example.
Yeah. I mean, if you can't communicate it in a couple of lines, it's like, guys, like we need to get away from as much trust me, bro, as possible. Even when it's like saying to your boss, like, trust me, bro, like this is a good thing. If you can't communicate to your friend or to your colleague, like, hey, this is what this piece is about. And I think it's going to be I think it's really going to help us because XYZ things. They're not going to look at it. And you've just wasted, 5 seconds trying to copy and paste and click it in and try to convince somebody to read it. Right. I send stuff to my wife all the time and I think maybe 1 out of 5 things I can get her to read because I'm just like, watch this. And she's like, why? And I'm like, because it's good. She's like, I don't have time. I'm like, then that's my wife, right? Like, I love my wife. I read everything. I watch every TikTok she sends me.
Not the other way around.
Right. But she sends me TikToks. It's like, very short things. I'm like, hey, watch this 30-minute video. And she's like, no.
That's so I guess like thank you for sharing the three. I'm curious if you have an example, whether it's something you've seen before or written
Mhm.
or like that you've created in the past that kind of embodies these three axioms really, really well.
Yeah. So I don't like being self-promotional. Like I think even though I've mentioned the show and I've like, there was a piece I wrote years ago that was called the four reasons or the four important metrics. What was it? The four reasons, the four major goals of content marketing, right? The four goals. And the first one was to be discussed. The second one was to be shared. Third one was to generate leads. And the fourth one was to generate sales. And the idea behind this is when you think about these goals, right? You've got your premise in place. And now as you get into the actual execution of the thing that you're trying to do, you have to have this one singular minded focus as you're going from thoughts to fingertips. And it needs to be difficult, right? I imagine like this demon that I'm trying to force into my screen that it like doesn't want to go. It's like this rabid thing that I'm trying to push out and into the screen, and it fights and struggles the entire time. But if you're writing with the intention of getting shared, right? Like you're really infusing that type of energy. You're going to start doing things like, taking little moments where, hey, is this a tweetable thing? Can I say this? And, it used to be 120 characters or 140 characters. Can I make this line something people are going to want to copy and paste and put out there? Can I, or if you go to like something to be discussed, right? Can I put something in here? Can I put a question or a hot take or something in here that gets somebody so heated, right, that they're going to want to talk about it publicly? Or not heated, but like, any sort of an actual visceral emotional response that they'll want to talk about it publicly, or this was a little bit further back, but like, or now get them to talk about it privately, right, in channels you can't measure, right? Can I create these questions? Can I get people thinking and be contemplative and want to talk about this stuff? So be shared, be discussed, generate leads. Again, you still need to have a solid premise to generate that lead. So just be self-promotional again. I created something called The Vault, which is all of the different editors that I've had on my shows. We've now taken those edits and made them publicly available. It's not really to generate leads. I mean, eventually I'll put out an offer for that, but that's to generate leads and to generate sales. Then it's like, hey, now that you've seen all of this, here's an offer that's related to all of these other things, right? And all of those steps map to different goals that we would actually have of like, hey, let's generate traffic. Let's, get leads, like let's make sales. They do map to different parts of the funnel, but that wasn't the idea. That piece that embodied those three axioms that I'm talking about those four different goals, that piece was discussed in private Slack channels, right? On somebody who was somebody who runs a podcast, an agency that runs a podcast. And then they invited me to the podcast to talk about that specific piece.
That's cool.
And it's because I knew the premise of the piece was solid.
Mm.
I knew that I wanted it to be discussed because that's how I wrote it. I knew the premise was good. I knew it was going to be shared. And then it was a form of social currency because the person who shared it, it was the leader of the company sharing it with the rest of the company saying, hey, we need to read this. Everybody needs to check this out. Right. And you see that with like larger organizations too, or you don't see that with larger organizations is your like VP will go, hey, everybody to their private, internal team newsletter where it's like, check this out. This is really good. That's how you're like infiltrating. And then if you can get people's attention, no matter what, then they're going to keep coming back to you.
I love that. I love that kind of really embodies those three. You were able to go on this podcast because you had a good premise, shared on Slack or some kind of private messaging, and it had good social currency. Appreciate you sharing that. I want to switch gears and talk about career power-ups. Now, you've been in content marketing now for over 18 years. I know I mentioned some of the companies that you've worked with earlier, but curious something that's helped you accelerate your career, whether that's something like a soft skill or like a writing skill. What's something helped you like accelerate your career so that you have this leg up to other folks?
Honestly, and I hate to say this because I know how it sounds, but it's operating off of these principles, right?
Yeah.
And as these principles have evolved over time, to give you an idea, I've been in this space for a long time. I've been doing this for a long time, but I started my career in a boarding house. I was making I had $700 a month for rent, and it was a $600 a month rent, and I was making $700. Like there was a lot of bologna sandwiches, right? Because I could afford bread, mustard, and bologna, and I hate bologna now. But putting the work out into the world and kind of developing these ideologies is something that has worked really well. When I put in the application for CXL, that was like the first real big gig, right? I had a body of work that I had built out before that was like, hey, this guy really seems to understand what it means to create good content. And that's really what it is for me, is it's like create good content. And you can apply a lot of these methodologies with the right research to a lot of different areas. And then that work there, CXL gave me a platform. That's what got me recruited into Shopify. That's what got me invited to a conference that I had spoke at once, failed miserably at, but the premise of the thing was good. I started consulting with the folks over at QuickBooks. And then when it was time to move, I said, I built out an operation with them at QuickBooks. Jimmy Daly actually ran it. And once I built that out and Jimmy was ready to move on to do animals, then I was like, hey, let me fill in, right? And then they had the layoff. And then I started my own business. And then, having this whole body of work that's come before it, now it's like the content studio, there's a little bit of a trust, there's a reputation within the space because of those things. So the thing that has really been the power up has been focusing on these areas through the writing and the content creation in general to then get people thinking, get people talking, get people sharing, get people doing, having discussions and making decisions. Like it's just been an accumulation of that. So I wish I had like any hacks. It's just been a lot of hard work and trusting the process.
It reminds me, Brendan Hufford said something similar in his episode 18 that just came out, that one of his power-ups is around a book that he read from Cal Newport, like be so good people can't ignore you. And you're talking about this, like you build up your skill around this, that you're so good that it opened up the next door, essentially. And then I think that kind of speaks to that, like investing in your skill, doubling down, and like honing your craft. And this Axioms these 3 Axioms probably were built over 18 years of your career to figure out, people share over stuff before promise gets you there. So I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. And I mean, the filmmaking background really helps too, because like I grew up I went to a conservatory for dramatic arts, right? For film and television. And that was one of those things where once I started seeing the parallels between the two, where like customer service is improv, market research is script analysis, like there's a lot of like story structure is story structure no matter what. Like this screen that you and I are talking on right now isn't very different. It's just more interactive than the movie screens or TV screens of the past. Now is easier than ever to implement these things and get in front of the right people. So LinkedIn or Twitter, right? You get in front of the right people and you have these solid premises. They're going to share, you're going to spread. And we've seen this, I've seen a handful of people now over the last couple of years just blow up out of nowhere. Name drop 2 people right now. Erica Schneider, who a lot of people know now. A year ago, she was like, I'm good on LinkedIn, but like, I don't know Twitter. I'm not as good on Twitter. Now it's like, she's got, I don't even know how many people following her. And then Amanda Natividad is another one where she went to like 200,000 followers on Twitter in a very short period of time because she understood who the seed audiences were, and how those people shared and what they shared, and then started creating stuff that was like within that sweet spot of what they'd share, but also with her own unique take on this. So it's like, now is easier than ever if you're able to up-level your skills and understand what it is that gets people to share. That takes a lot of research.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to understand what it's going to be, like what something is going to say about somebody when they share. But if you're able to focus on that technique and that craft, it is easier than ever now to have those connections. The hard part is the execution.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. Second to last question, if you can give yourself a message, a message that traveled back to time 18 years ago when Tommy was starting up his content marketing career, what would that piece of advice be? Once again, it could be around content, it could be marketing, it could be around writing, or it could be a soft skill. Like, what would advice be to that younger version of you?
Don't lose hope.
Wow.
Don't lose hope.
Just let that sink in. That's so deep. I love it. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Well, that was a fun and informative chat. You got me really thinking about my writing and content marketing principles. I actually jumped on Tommy's show, The Cutting Room, where you can actually find it in the show notes and description as well. You can find out more about Tommy's work at contentstudio.com. Also find him on LinkedIn and Twitter. All those links are in the show notes and description. Thanks to Tommy for being on the show. If you enjoyed this episode, you'd love the Marketing Powerups newsletter. I share the actionable takeaways and break down the frameworks of world-class marketers. You can go to marketingpowerups.com to subscribe, and you'll instantly unlock the 3 best frameworks that top marketers use to hit their KPIs consistently and wow their colleagues. I want to say thank you to you for listening, and please like and follow Marketing Powerups on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. If you're feeling extra generous, kindly leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and leave a comment on YouTube. It goes a long way in others finding out about Marketing Powerups. Thanks to Mary Sullivan for creating the artwork and design, and thank you to Faisal Taigo for editing the intro video. And of course, thank you for listening. That's all for now. Have a powered up day.
Marketing Power-Ups. Until the next episode,